The breaking point. The Galactic Council had always viewed humanity as a fragmented species. Their reports spoke of a broken civilization, endless wars, divided nations, conflicting beliefs. When the alien confederation known as the Hegemony arrived, at Earth's borders they expected easy conquest. Commander Vex of the Hegemony fleet studied the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Earth's defenses were scattered across dozens of nations, each with their own military doctrine. The humans fought among themselves even as alien ships gathered at their doorstep. Intelligence reports showed civil wars, territorial disputes, and ideological conflicts spanning every continent. Pathetic, Vex muttered to his second-in-command, Officer Kryn. Look at them. They cannot even unite against an external threat. Their so-called United Nations is nothing but a debate club. Half their military assets are pointed at each other. The first wave of hegemony forces struck Earth's outer colonies with brutal efficiency. Mars Base 7 fell within hours. When they mining stations in the asteroid belt surrendered without firing a shot. Each victory confirmed what the aliens had believed all along. Humanity was too divided to mount any real resistance. On Earth, the news networks broadcast scenes of chaos. Governments blamed each other for the failed defenses. Military leaders argued over command structures. Civilians panicked as refugee ships fled the outer system, bringing tales of overwhelming alien firepower. General Hayes, commander of the North American Defense Grid, watched the tactical displays with growing frustration. The European alliance refused to share intelligence. The Asian coalition was pulling their forces back to defend their own territories. Even now, with humanity facing extinction, they could not work together. But something else was happening in the shadows. Deep beneath NORAD, in facilities that officially did not exist, other conversations were taking place. Representatives from every major power sat around a table that had been prepared for this exact scenario decades ago. Dr. Martinez, head of the classified Terra Defense Initiative, looked at the assembled faces. Gentlemen, ladies, the masquerade ends now. Project Unity has been waiting for this moment for 40 years. The room fell silent. Even the most hardened military officers seemed stunned by what they were hearing. You mean to tell us, said Colonel Petrov of the Russian Federation, that this division, these conflicts, the public arguments, it was all theater? Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. Every war, every territorial dispute, every ideological conflict for the past 4 decades has served a single purpose: to convince any watching alien species that humanity is hopelessly fragmented. We learned long ago that we were being observed. We knew they would come eventually. The screens around the room came alive with data streams that painted a radically different picture of human capabilities. Hidden manufacturing facilities on every continent. Secret weapon stockpiles that dwarfed publicly known arsenals. Underground command networks that connected every major power through quantum encrypted channels. While the world watched us fight over resources, Dr. Martinez continued, we were actually building the most sophisticated defense network in galactic history. Every public military installation they've studied is a decoy. Every apparent weakness in our coordination is carefully crafted misdirection. Admiral Chen of the Pacific Fleet leaned forward. The outer colonies? Evacuated 3 days before the attack. Every civilian, every piece of valuable equipment. What they conquered were empty shells with just enough activity to seem real. Commander Vex would have been disturbed to know that even as he celebrated his easy victories, every move his forces made was being tracked by sensors they could not detect. Every communication was being intercepted and decoded. Every tactical pattern was being fed into war computers that had been analyzing alien behavior for decades. The hegemony had made the fatal mistake of believing their own intelligence reports. They saw exactly what humanity wanted them to see, a species too primitive and divided to pose any real threat. As the alien fleet moved toward Earth for what they believed would be the final assault, the last phase of humanity's longest-running deception was about to begin. The fractured, chaotic species they expected to crush was about to reveal itself as something far more dangerous. In war rooms across Earth, officers who had spent their careers pretending to be enemies finally dropped their masks. The greatest military minds of a dozen nations who had publicly feuded for decades now worked as the unified command structure they had always secretly been. The hegemony was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to make an enemy believe they had already won. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. The Illusion Crumble's commander Vex received the first disturbing reports as his main fleet entered Earth's solar system. His advance, scouts who should have been mopping up the scattered human resistance had gone silent one by one. Probably equipment failures, Officer Kryn suggested, but his voice carried doubt. These primitive systems can be unreliable. The hegemony had built their reputation on overwhelming force and superior technology. For 3 centuries, they had conquered system after system using the same basic strategy: identify the strongest faction, crush them publicly, and watch the others surrender rather than face the same fate. It had worked perfectly with the Altarian Empire, whose proud warrior culture crumbled once their homeworld burned. The merchant princes of Kepler 442 had bought their way to temporary safety, only to find that the hegemony's appetite for tribute grew until resistance became impossible. Earth should have been even easier. The humans broadcast their weaknesses openly. Their news networks showed civil unrest. Their politicians argued in public forums. Their military exercises revealed outdated equipment and poor coordination. But as Vex's fleet approached Earth, the readings on his sensors began to tell a different story. "Sir," his tactical officer announced, voice tight with confusion, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface, much larger than our intelligence predicted." Vex studied the displays with growing unease. The power readings were not just higher than expected, they were impossible. According to their analysis, Earth's total energy production capacity was barely sufficient to maintain their civilization. These readings suggested output levels that should have been visible from space. "Check the sensors for malfunction," he ordered. But the sensors were working perfectly. As the hegemony fleet drew closer, more impossible readings flooded their systems. Underground facilities that their orbital surveillance had never detected. Weapon emplacements that appeared overnight in locations that had shown no military activity for decades. On Earth, the final preparations were being completed. In facilities buried miles beneath the surface, fusion reactors that had been hidden for 40 years came online. Manufacturing complexes that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure began producing weapons at rates that defied galactic norms. General Hayes stood in the real command center, a vast underground complex that connected to similar facilities on every continent. The cramped, outdated control room he had worked from during the public briefings was just another prop in humanity's greatest deception. "Phase 2 is complete," Dr. Martinez reported. "All surface installations are showing our true capabilities. The masquerade is over. The transformation was breathtaking. Civilian spaceports revealed themselves as military launching facilities. Research universities opened underground levels that housed the most advanced weapons laboratories in the galaxy. Even seemingly innocent structures like radio telescopes suddenly bristled with energy weapons that had been hidden within their frames. But the most stunning revelation was happening in orbit around Earth. What the hegemony had dismissed as scattered debris and obsolete satellites suddenly came alive with power signatures that dwarfed their own capital ships. Commander Vex watched in horror as humanity's primitive space infrastructure revealed its true nature. Ancient communication satellites deployed weapon systems that his scanners could barely comprehend. Industrial platforms that should have been derelict began moving with precision that spoke of advanced artificial intelligence. "This is impossible," Officer Kryn whispered. "Our intelligence said they barely had chemical rockets. How are they powering systems like this?" The answer was 40 years of careful planning and the greatest secret in human history. While the world had watched public space programs struggle with limited budgets and political interference, the real human space program had been building an orbital defense network that made the hegemony's vaunted fleet look primitive. Every piece of space junk in Earth's orbit was a weapon. Every communications satellite was a sensor node. Every supply mission to the International Space Station had secretly carried components for humanity's ultimate defense system. As Vex's fleet tried to process what they were seeing, The first, human transmission cut through their communications channels. It was broadcast simultaneously on every frequency, in perfect hegemony standard language. Hegemony Fleet, the voice was calm, almost conversational. This is Admiral Santos of the Terran Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space without authorization. You have exactly 1 hour to reverse course and leave this system. Vex's mandibles clicked in rage. Impossible bluffing! They cannot have developed this level of technology in secret. But even as he spoke, his tactical displays were painting a picture that crushed his certainty. Earth was not the fragmented, primitive world they had studied. It was a fortress that had been preparing for this exact moment for decades. The prey had revealed itself to be the predator. The first Strike Commander Vex had built his career on reading the fear in his enemies' communications. The trembling voices of planetary governors pleading for mercy. The desperate bargaining of military commanders who knew they were outgunned. But Admiral Santos's transmission carried something Vex had never heard before when addressing the hegemony. Complete confidence. 1 hour, Vex snarled to his bridge crew. These humans think they can dictate terms to us. Show them the price of arrogance. The hegemony's standard intimidation tactic was brutal and effective. They would select a major population center and reduce it to plasma, demonstrating their power while leaving enough survivors to spread word of what resistance would bring. Fear was their most effective weapon. Vex selected his target, the sprawling megacity of Tokyo, home to 40 million humans. His forward battleships moved into firing position, their planet-killer weapons charging with the distinctive whine that had terrorized 100 worlds. But as the first shots lanced down toward Earth's surface, something impossible happened. The beam simply vanished. "Report," Vex roared, his confidence cracking. "Sir, the energy readings are off the charts. They're using some kind of planetary shielding system. The power requirements alone should be impossible for their civilization level." What the hegemony could not have known was that humanity's deception ran deeper than hidden weapons or secret facilities. For 40 years, Earth's greatest scientists had been working on technologies that officially did not exist, while the public watched fusion power remain perpetually 30 years away. Underground facilities had been running on fusion reactors since the 1990s. Dr. Martinez watched from the Terra Defense Command as Earth's shield grid absorbed the hegemony's assault. The energy was not wasted. It was being fed directly into humanity's response systems. Every shot the aliens fired was making Earth's weapons more powerful. "Their energy weapons are remarkably inefficient," she noted to the tactical team. "We're actually getting a net power gain from their attacks." Admiral Santos opened the communication channel again. "Hegemony Fleet, your 1 hour has expired. You have refused our offer to leave peacefully. Terran Defense Force is now authorized to respond with appropriate force." Vex barely had time to process the transmission before his sensors screamed warnings. From Earth's surface, from its orbital installations, from what had appeared to be empty space, weapons fire erupted with devastating precision. But these were not the crude chemical rockets or primitive energy weapons the hegemony had expected. These were technologies that represented 40 years of secret human innovation, powered by energy sources that should not have been possible. The first volley crippled 6 hegemony battleships. The second destroyed them completely. Impossible! Vex watched his tactical display update with catastrophic losses. Where did they get technology like this? The answer would have shocked him. Humanity's greatest advantage was not their unity or their deception. It was their approach to innovation. While other species followed predictable technological development paths, humans had taken an anarchic approach that produced breakthroughs the galaxy had never seen. While the hegemony had perfected energy weapons that followed established physics principles, human scientists had been experimenting with exotic matter manipulation. While alien species relied on conventional fusion power, Earth's hidden reactors were tapping directly into zero-point energy fluctuations. General Hayes coordinated the counterattack from his underground command center. Target their command, vessels first. Make them feel what it's like to fight blind. The hegemony's tactical advantage had always been their superior coordination and battlefield awareness, but humanity's secret defense network was designed specifically to counter this strength. Every alien ship was being tracked by sensors they could not detect. Every communication was being intercepted and decoded in real time. Within minutes, the hegemony fleet found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Their supposedly secret tactical frequencies were being jammed. Their encrypted communications were being turned against them. Commander Vex realized with growing horror that his fleet was not just outgunned, they were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that understood their capabilities better than they understood themselves. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the fleet. They're targeting our weak points with impossible precision. It's as if they have complete technical specifications for our ships." They did. For 40 years, human intelligence had been studying every piece of hegemony technology they could acquire. Trade agreements, diplomatic exchanges, even salvage. From their previous conquests, all of it had been carefully analyzed and cataloged. The humans had not just prepared for this war. They had designed their entire defense strategy around the hegemony's specific weaknesses. As his flagship shuddered under impacts from weapons that should not have existed, Vex finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. This was not a conquest. It was an ambush 40 years in the making. The hunter becomes hunted. The pride of the hegemony fleet, the super dreadnought Dominator, had never retreated from battle in its 300-year service record. Its massive bulk had cast shadows over the surrender ceremonies of dozens of species. But now, as Commander Vex watched his escort vessels die around him, retreat was becoming his only option. "Signal general withdrawal," he ordered, his voice hollow with disbelief. "All ships fall back to rally point 7. But Admiral Santos had anticipated this response. As the surviving hegemony vessels attempted to disengage, they discovered that Earth's defenses extended far beyond the planet itself. What they had dismissed as ancient human space junk suddenly revealed its true purpose. Thousands of objects that had appeared on sensors as defunct satellites and debris began moving with deadly intent. The entire inner solar system had been turned into a weapons platform. Officer Kryn studied his tactical displays with mounting panic. "Sir, they're everywhere. Every piece of debris, every asteroid, every derelict station, they're all active weapon systems." The scope of humanity's deception was staggering. For decades, every space mission had carried hidden components. Every commercial satellite had concealed military hardware. Even the abandoned space stations from humanity's early expansion had been secretly converted into automated defense platforms. Dr. Martinez monitored the battle from Terra Defense Command, her expression grim but determined. "Phase 3 is now active. Deploy the hunter-killer squadrons." The hegemony's retreat quickly turned into a rout as Earth's most secret weapons revealed themselves. Ships that had been hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as mining operations, suddenly blazed to life with engine signatures that outclassed anything in the alien fleet. These were not the lumbering chemical rockets that the hegemony had expected. Humanity's hidden space navy was powered by technology that represented the culmination of 40 years of black-budget research. Fusion ramjets that could sustain impossible accelerations, weapon systems that bent the laws of physics in ways that should have taken centuries to develop. Commander Vex watched in horror as his fastest scout ships were overtaken and destroyed by human vessels that moved like nothing he had ever seen. How are they achieving those acceleration rates? Our best ships can barely match their slowest units. The answer lay in humanity's unique approach to risk and innovation. While other species developed technology through careful, methodical research over centuries, humans had been willing to experiment with theories that other civilizations considered too dangerous to attempt. The results were vessels that operated on principles the galaxy considered impossible, engines that manipulated space-time itself, weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, defensive systems that turned enemy fire into additional power for their own systems. General Hayes coordinated the pursuit from his command center. "Don't let them reach the outer system. If even one ship escapes to report back to their fleet command, they'll know what they're really facing." The hegemony had never fought an enemy like this. Their standard tactics, perfected over centuries of conquest, were useless against opponents who seemed to understand their every move before they made it. Every attempt at regrouping was countered before it could begin. Every tactical formation was broken by precise strikes at exactly the right moment. But the most terrifying aspect of humanity's response was not their advanced technology. It was their apparent understanding of hegemony psychology and tactics. The human forces were not just winning battles, they were systematically destroying the enemy's will to fight. "Sir," Kryn reported, his voice shaking, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. The humans are broadcasting technical specifications for our ships, complete tactical doctrine analyses, even personal psychological profiles of our command staff. They know everything about us. They did." 40 years of preparation had included the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. Every piece of information about the hegemony, their technology, their tactics, their individual commanders, had been collected and analyzed. The humans had not just prepared to fight the hegemony, they had prepared to psychologically destroy them. As the last hegemony vessels fled toward the outer system, they were hunted by an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every desperate maneuver. Ships that tried to hide in asteroid fields found human forces already waiting for them. Vessels that attempted to send distress signals discovered their communications being jammed by systems they could not even detect. Commander Vex, alone in the shattered remains of his once proud fleet, finally understood the true horror of what they had encountered. The humans had not just defeated them, they had revealed the hegemony's greatest weakness. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had relied on the fear and division of their enemies, but they had never faced an enemy that could pretend to be weak while growing strong, an enemy that could appear fractured while secretly united. They had never faced an enemy that could lie as effectively as humanity. Complete annihilation. The message reached Hegemony High Command through their most secure channels, but it might as well have been broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Vex's final transmission was brief and devastating. "Earth was a trap. The humans are not what we thought. Request immediate reinforcement of all border systems. They are coming." Fleet Admiral Thaxon of the Hegemony High Command studied the fragmentary reports with growing unease. In 3 centuries of expansion, no enemy had ever inflicted such catastrophic losses on a hegemony fleet. The destruction of Vex's armada was not just a tactical defeat. It was a revelation that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. But Admiral Santos and the Terran Defense Force were already moving beyond Earth's solar system. The time for defensive operations had ended. Humanity was about to demonstrate why their species had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Phase 4 is now active, Dr. Martinez announced from Terra Defense Command. Operation Prometheus has been authorized. Across human space, the final deceptions were being revealed. What the galaxy had seen as humanity's desperate expansion into marginal systems was actually the deployment of the most sophisticated military infrastructure ever constructed. Every mining colony, every research station, every seemingly vulnerable outpost was a fortress designed to support offensive operations. The hegemony had studied human expansion and dismissed it as the chaotic scrambling of a primitive species. They saw colonies established in systems with poor resources, research stations built in locations that made no strategic sense, industrial complexes that appeared hopelessly inefficient. But efficiency had never been the goal. Every human outpost was positioned to support a single, overwhelming assault on the hegemony's core systems. What appeared to be random expansion was actually a carefully orchestrated deployment that had taken decades to complete. Fleet Admiral Thaxon received the first reports of human attacks with disbelief that quickly turned to terror. The strikes were not coming from Earth as expected, but from a dozen different directions simultaneously. Human forces were emerging from systems the hegemony had never even considered strategic. "Impossible," he muttered, studying the tactical displays. "They couldn't have hidden fleets this large. Our intelligence networks would have detected them." But humanity's deception ran deeper than hidden fleets. The attacks were being launched by forces that had been built in secret over 4 decades, using resources and technology that officially did not exist. While the galaxy watched humanity struggle with seemingly primitive space technology, their hidden industrial capacity had been producing weapons that made hegemony fleets look obsolete. General Hayes coordinated the multi-system assault from Terra Defense Command. Remember, this is not conquest. This is complete elimination of their ability to threaten any species ever again. The hegemony's standard response to major threats was to gather their scattered fleets into a unified armada that could overwhelm any enemy through sheer mass. But humanity had planned for this response. As hegemony forces converged on their rally points, they found human fleets already waiting for them. The battles that followed were not contests between equal forces. They were systematic destructions that demonstrated the full scope of humanity's technological advancement. Hegemony ships that had seemed invincible found themselves outgunned by human vessels that operated on principles they could not comprehend. But the most devastating aspect of humanity's assault was not their superior technology. It was their complete understanding of hegemony psychology and tactics. Every command decision was anticipated. Every tactical formation was countered before it could be effective. Every attempt at negotiation was rejected with mechanical precision. Fleet Admiral Thaxon's desperate attempts to contact the human commanders were met with a single repeated message. The hegemony will be completely eliminated. This is not negotiable. The one phrase that had struck fear into 100 species, resistance is futile, was being turned back on its creators with devastating effectiveness. But humanity's version carried a different meaning. Where the hegemony had demanded submission, humanity was promising extinction. Within 6 months, the 3-century-old hegemony was reduced to scattered remnants hiding in the galaxy's most remote systems. Their fleets were destroyed, their infrastructure was captured or eliminated, and their ability to threaten anyone was permanently ended. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity accomplished what no other species had even attempted. They had not just defeated the hegemony, they had erased it as a political entity. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came in humanity's final broadcast to the galaxy. This is Admiral Santos of the Terran Defense Force. The hegemony threat has been eliminated. All species are now free to determine their own futures without fear of conquest or subjugation. The species that the galaxy had dismissed as shattered and primitive had just liberated them all. The humans, who had appeared fractured and weak, had revealed themselves as the most formidable military force in galactic history. They had seen humanity as broken. Humanity had shown them what complete annihilation actually looked like. The end.